Be sure to check out mythvisionpodcast.com. Help MythVision grow, guys. Become a Patreon member. You guys will get early access to all my videos when I'm done editing them. Also, it's a small community where you guys can message me your questions and talk to me in private. You guys can also donate through PayPal and Cash App. Join the social media links down in the description. We have Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social media. Help the community of MythVision grow. Hit the subscribe button, hit that bell so you guys are notified every time I do a live video and you don't miss any of my content. Dr. Price. Marty Commons was a donor and he helped me and you out in our donation. Thank you so much, Marty. I appreciate that. And he says, I've been following Dr. Price for years. Just subscribed to MythVision 2 weeks ago. Are either of you familiar with the work of Zen Garcia or Rob Skiba? Both Christians, but not the kind you find in a church. And so, to be fair to Marty, and to be fair to our audience, I just Googled and looked up on YouTube a few short clips that kind of talk about maybe a few things that they've discussed on Rob Skiba being, you know, he has something like the Nephilim returning and things like that. It seems almost sci-fi type, which some Christian groups that I used to be a part of were into these things. And there were real giants on Earth where they say they found skulls and bones of like 36-foot giants and, you know, on and on. It's just, it's an interesting topic, but is it factual? Is this real? And so this is something that I looked up, and Zen Garcia, and we saw an 8-minute introduction to what he does, his daughter and his son do on their channel, and that found out that they collab. And so both of them together, I suspect, are in the similar vein of thought. It's beyond the typical Christian's view. Like the average Orthodox Christian would not touch these guys with a 10-foot pole. At the same time, there's the faith angle, and there is I believe there's probably limitations on being critical to these manuscripts that we're talking about. One of the things that were brought up by Zen Garcia was the infancy gospel, and they are into some interesting stuff, which I applaud. But what did you think about what we saw so far between both of those guys? Since the question was kind of formulated with both of us in mind, I'll be honest, a bad taste got in my mouth when I heard end times, end generation, like we're in the end times generation. I have such I guess I have such a bias on my opinions of the eschatological or apocalyptic approach, and the end being, I do think they were anticipating that the end was back then. So to progress it and to push it 2,000 years and to continue, I know the verses that are used to contend that idea. I have a bad taste, Dr. Price, on that. But as far as them being into these other manuscripts and looking beyond the canon to find sacred scripture, I applaud them to like expand their consciousness on those things and to dwell in places most Christians aren't. I will shut up from here now.
Well, yeah, I do have the same sort of problems. It seems to me that they're very healthily curious, but not sufficiently critical. They don't seem to know how to evaluate evidence, like the infancy Gospels of Matthew, Thomas, James, and so on. They're almost comedy. The episodes are so ridiculous that they're like folk tales. As a professor of mine, Gordon Fee, once said, it's like Jesus the Menace. That Jesus is, it's docetic in a sense, because Jesus is already an adult who knows everything. And so Joseph sends him to a rabbi to teach him the alphabet. And young Jesus says, well, I know all that. Can you tell me the meaning, the secret meaning of these letters? And the teacher says, well, you're an impertinent brat, and hits him with a ruler, and Jesus strikes him dead. And there's a similar one where he does get more control of himself, but outsmarts the rabbi who says, look, I give up. This kid knows more than I do. There's one where some kid on the playground bumps into Jesus, and Jesus says to him, "You will go no further on your way." Zap, and the kid collapses dead. There's one where Jesus is on the rooftop of an abandoned building playing with some other kid, and the other kid, Zeno, trips and falls to his death. And since Jesus has apparently dispatched other kids in the neighborhood, the parents all gather and say to Joseph, "Your kid is killing our kids." And Jesus says, "I didn't kill him. Let's get an eyewitness." And he raises Zeno from the dead to say, "Did I push you or what?" "No, no, no, you didn't." And so on and so on. Like, it's... another professor of mine, David Scholler, said he thinks that all these things were just jokes, but I doubt it. There are silly things in the canonical Gospels that don't quite go that far, but you're in the twilight zone there. If you take that seriously as biographical information about Jesus, just because somebody in the ancient world said they were, you ought to think twice about why you believe the Gospels too, and it also makes you have some sympathy for the people that decided to narrow the scope of the canon. Do you really think that the Epistle to the Romans belongs in the same book with the infancy Gospel of Thomas? I don't think so. You're just really lengthening the line of defense there. You got an awful lot more explaining to do. The idea that Jesus' birth was prophesied in the Old Testament, you just cannot take that seriously in terms of Isaiah predicting Nebuchadnezzar or something, where they're believable contemporary references. In fact, I think Matthew, who makes the most of supposed prophecies of Jesus, doesn't mean what Hal Lindsey means. He's more like the Dead Sea Scrolls authors who believed that the literal historical understanding of the Tanakh was one thing, but there was a secret meaning inserted by the Holy Spirit that no one could have recognized except in retrospect. Now that Jesus appeared, you begin to think, could that have been a reference, a cryptic, coded reference to so-and-so? Jesus and his family go to Egypt and come back to fulfill Hosea 11:1, out of Egypt I've called my son. Matthew knew that had nothing to do with Jesus on the surface, right? It's obviously about the exodus of the children of Israel out of it. Was he trying to deceive you? They won't even be able to look this up. I can pull the wool over there. No. He meant that in retrospect, it's like the Bible code thing from some years ago. Nobody could have recognized these predictions, if that's what they are, in advance, nor were you supposed to. It took like a decoding hermeneutic to get it, and I just think that's, you can make it say anything, the Bible becomes a ventriloquist dummy. The idea of the Nephilim, this Zechariah Sitchin thing, fascinating, and I don't know about others, but Sitchin himself was certainly a very scholarly person. I really loved reading The 12th Planet, but his interpretation that they were the Nephilim and the sons of God were space aliens and all that. Look, I think there are space aliens. That seems to me, at the moment, the best explanation from these reports of pilots and all that. And the idea that they came to Earth earlier and showed people how to do it could have happened. I don't know that that it's the most probable guess, but that's only because we don't have much evidence one way or the other. Could have happened, but you can't just say, oh yeah, because it could have, and it's an interesting idea, it must be true. So these guys seem to me to be sort of I'm sorry, this is what this is going to sound like, but eccentric fundamentalists. They're widening the scope to get other texts, to get new information, but they don't know how to evaluate it, and it's all fanciful speculation. There's no real reason that I can see to believe these things, and I really don't see what relevance it has to anybody's spiritual life. Suppose there were 36-foot high giants. So what? I mean, that would be interesting. Like if we found out, oh yeah, the abominable snowman is real. Would that have any theological significance? I doubt it. So why does the resurrection of Jesus have meaning? I mean, it's you could look at it as an anomalous event. Again, think of UFOs. It's striking and interesting, but the only reason the resurrection story has meaning to us is we act out it, we step into it for a transformative experience in baptism. You die and rise with Christ. If it weren't for that, who'd care? I mean, there are a lot of resurrection stories about ancient gods. We don't think they're important to us, but these do, because we hear them in a ritual, communal setting. For our religion, it's a whole system. And this other stuff seems to me not only to be ill-supported, but irrelevant, though fascinating.
Yeah, the way I would frame it based on what I saw, and this is limited exposure to these gentlemen, so
sure.
This is totally... I don't even know if this is a fair video, but I'm just simply putting it out there. It sounded like Mr. Zen was thinking the end is soon. His children are into this end times generation idea. And the guy he collabs with that's, well-known movie and radio, and also have to say thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Amen.
In case you see this video, he's a veteran.
He's a better man than I am, simply based on that.
But that being said, it's Rob Skiba and Zen Garcia. They collab together, and Rob Skiba mentioned, and just the title of his videos tell me, based on just the little bit I did see, the return of the Nephilim. Like, they're coming back again. It's like... don't take this wrong, but you remember the cult that believed that Jesus and the UFOs were coming, and they castrated themselves and whatnot.
Heaven's Gate.
Right. That extreme type of cult mentality is easily something that can happen if you pocket these house church type ideas, and they take to extreme some of these books or text, or something becomes almost like doctrine in those churches.
Sounds like it here.
And that is a concern to me. I understand wanting to have faith, wanting to pray. I understand how people would do that. This sounds like a orthodox heretic combination. And I think the reason many people do this is they see the problems with strictly orthodox positions, but also the interest and the piqued interest of the common folk. More people are interested in sci-fi. More people want to know about giants and fallen angels and like the cool fun stuff that gets you more hits, more views, more. I'm not saying that's not their motivation. That might be what they're also drawn to as well, which is why they're doing it. But it sounds kind of, it's like you said, interesting. I love sci-fi. I love comic books. I love watching the Avengers, all that good stuff. Finding a way to mix your boring orthodoxy with exciting comic book sounds to me something similar like that. If that
you're trying to juice it up, which means that's a danger sign, because if without that stuff it's just boring and old hat, you got a real problem.
I could be totally poisoning the well and strawmanning and misrepresenting, and I don't want to be that. I'm sure they have interesting stuff they talk about.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Just being critical based on what we did hear it seems like there's not really too much critical. It's more of like a faith-based approach. So they're coming at it biasly, like, what can we glean from this spiritually? How can we read this so that this influences our life? Because an early church father read this and they were influenced. Therefore, we should too, because we're Christians and they were Christians. And therefore, the infancy gospel is really teaching some underneath message. Jesus wasn't really being cruel to children. The message wasn't that. You're reading that into it. What it really meant was inside one's heart, or whatever. I'm just being funny and making
That's the ventriloquist dummy approach. All allegory is trying to take bad texts and make them good. It's not ridiculous. It's profound. That's what Philo did with the Old Testament. That's what the Stoics did with the Iliad and the Odyssey. And it's utterly pointless. You're just saving face. Why don't you just think for yourself and take these deeper notions that you already have and forget about the text, except that it's an object of great interest to us because we love it, but you don't need to justify it that way.
So I hope that answers the question to some degree, and I hope you don't mind the criticisms. But I'm sure they're great guys. I really do. I just, based on what I heard, they're just convinced the same way my pastor used to be and the same way I was. And I think you were convinced, but you were still open in a different way. I think I was very fundamentalist.
Well, the end times thing, I've long thought that there's a book called The Antichrist by Arthur Pink, who's a great Reformed Calvinist Bible scholar, but an allegorizer. But at any rate, in the preface to this book by somebody else, he says that the Antichrist conjures up visions of Darth Vader. I said, doesn't that tell you something? That this, when I first got converted back when I was like 10 or 11 years old, I had never heard of the rapture, the Antichrist, the tribulation. Once I did hear of it, I said, wow, the second coming of Christ. I never knew about that. I said, this is great, because it was like fantasy, but real, I thought. So I can really understand this, but it's just, I think, essentially immature. And I say this as a comic book superhero fanatic. I watch monster movies and stuff. I am still a child in many ways, but I try to, in one sense, intellectually put childish things behind me.